right, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I don't want to take any extra time at the end. I know we might have classes to teach. I came from a class. I taught from 11 to 11:50 and came trucking over here in the rain. It was just in time. But I'm here to basically kind of walk you through a little bit more information in terms of our QEP initiative in connection with experiential learning. So I myself am Tiffany Goff. I am in the Department of English. I actually came here from another university where we were revising our gen ed. We were a private university and we were allowed to do revisions. And I was a co-chair for the gen ed committee, and we got to revise what gen ed looked like. And one of our big things was experiential learning. It just seemed very important to me because as an English professor, I'm always struggling with a class full of non-English majors who don't understand how amazing literature is, and I'm trying to connect them with why they need to be in a literature class. And I felt like one of the key things was just making connections between the skills we're learning in that literature class and the skills that I want them to have as a citizen of, the society and the world, right? And experiential learning was very much a nice bridge for me to use in my classes there and in our gen ed program. Came here and they were starting this amazing experiential learning initiative, and I applied to be an ambassador and got it, and have been, basically getting out there as much as I can to try to share how easy it is to work experiential learning into what you're already doing, if you're not already doing already and you just haven't taken a couple of steps. So today I'm just going to kind of walk you through. As you can see, this is the English teacher in me, right? We're going to look at, what is experiential learning? Why are we doing it? What is this QEP thing all about? Where is it going to fit into your curriculum and your course, right? Because that's kind of why you're here probably. And then how might it look if you're going to fill out that endorsement application and actually, put experiential learning into your course so that it can get endorsed. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through my own experiences doing that for my English comp course that I'm currently teaching. And then obviously we'll end with questions. So obviously I thought it might help to start with this what. And so I asked you to take the whiteboard and the marker. Yeah, I was supposed to be doing that while I was talking. Yeah, all right, so here we go. So I asked you to take a whiteboard marker, and I've got 3 questions for you that I think will kind of get us all on the same page in terms of why we're here, by figuring out why you're here, right? So the first question is, what is experiential learning to you? Like, it doesn't have to be any kind of crazy formal definition, just what do you think of? You can give me examples, whatever. Why do you think experiential learning is important? Because obviously it's important enough to become a QEP initiative for VSU. So why do you think it's important? And then why are you here, obviously? So just 3 quick little bullet points, if you'll get it down just on your whiteboard in some way, shape, or form. This way you just have something to kind of refer to when we share here in a minute. And if you get done early and you see your partner's done, obviously you can have a little chat and compare your answers if you'd like, take their answers if you like them better. We're all sharers in here. That's how education works. I'll just give you a minute or two to get your thoughts down. Well, Brian's done, so I'm going to go ahead and have a chat. If you've got people around you done, just go ahead and chat. Maybe compare your answers. All right. So, yeah, I'm going to see what you got. All right. Learn by doing. I've got giving students a chance to apply classroom content to real-world setting. Right. Connecting
close,
the two. Yeah. But yes.
Well,
all right.
You're
yes.
Hit me with the next one, I think.
All right. Yes. So connect education with life outside. Yeah. So that's kind of what I did in there, right? And I just put that's what college is for, right? Is doing that, right? Based on my definition. And then what did you come up with? Why you're here? Okay, yes, you have to observe me. You couldn't come up with something more than like it was obligatory. It was required.
No. No, we're presenting on this actually.
Oh, gotcha.
At the USG Teach and Learn.
The what we've been doing as
The
experiential learning
program.
Gotcha. Oh, nice. Okay. So I'm a guinea pig that you get to let go and put on display. I gotcha. Yeah. What about you? What you got? All right. Student experience the knowledge, and yes, its importance, right? So yeah, kind of what I'm saying. Yes, classroom content is the knowledge. I want them to see that it's important in the real world. I want to know how my students can benefit from it. Yes. So yes, and that's what I think. Yes, I think this is why we're here, right? College is about helping them see why our classes are important. They don't often see that right off the bat. And then you got, I want to know how my students can, okay, yeah.
Also, I want to know the difference between what we are traditionally doing and what
experiential learning can be. Yeah. So we'll get a chance to talk about examples, and the QEP website is going to give you a lot of examples. So I'll show you that resource. It's going to be helpful.
I visited the website earlier in
good.
the semester, but I couldn't see much there. Like, just an example or two.
I'll show you. Yeah. Well, and then I'll have my whole presentation you'll have after this. Yeah. All right. Okay. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to get their answers down. Maybe have a conversation. All right. So obviously, yes. The definition, right? I just want to get a couple of examples of some of the definitions that you guys found and see if we can't find some common threads in there that could kind of give us a sense of what we think experiential learning is, right? See if we can maybe get all on the same page. So who would like to share their definition? You've got your whiteboard, all you gotta do is read it off, right? Okay, so Mike has learning by doing, right? Okay, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody? That would be great. Okay, yeah, so if you participate, and I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself so that maybe we can start kind of understanding. I don't know hardly anybody in here, right? Because I've only been at VSU for 2 years, and one of those was a COVID year, so you know how that goes. I'm learning everybody as well. All right, you wanted to share?
Sure. I said that it's a cycle of an activity or practice that applies some method or theory in the discipline that you're teaching.
Okay.
And there's a reflection on the activity and its impact, and then applying what you learned in the reflection and the activity to either a larger project in the class or ideally outside the classroom.
Okay, and you are?
Oh, sorry.
It's fine.
I'm Sarah Fitzgerald. I'm in the history department.
Okay, history department, yes. So I hear 3 things, you said it 3 times, apply, that can go with what Mike said, learning by doing, right? So I feel like we kind of get a sense that experiential learning has something to do with applying something, right? And yeah, what Sarah was able to do there was kind of get into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to look at later in the presentation, that Kolb's experiential learning cycle, where it's not just about one thing you're doing that's experiential learning, it's about a process of things that you're doing that kind of make those connections and help you get the students to apply. Anybody else want to share their definition? Yeah, well, back here in the back, you can introduce yourself and tell us, and then we'll come up here in the front. Okay, French.
For me, experiential learning means to students connect the topics we cover in the class with the outside world.
Yes. That's almost exactly what I have. I have giving the students a chance to apply classroom content to real world setting and make the connection. So yes, I feel like that is what those of us that are in the languages, right, or even history, that's one of our big goals, right? Let them see why this is important, even if it's not your major, because I feel like we kind of struggle.
Many students in my language classes, they don't see the importance of learning languages.
Right.
I am here because I have to take language.
Yeah.
If I have the choice, I'm not taking.
Yes, it's on the checklist. Same thing with my World Lit class there and my English comp classes, right? Yeah. But World Lit is like it's hard to get them to see that. So yes, experiential learning can help us do that, right? Yes.
I'm Ann Price. I'm in sociology. We have our little sociology and
okay, a little pod there, yeah.
And I said students have an experience applying discipline skills and reflect on how they've used their skills and what they've learned.
Okay, so I like what you added, the word skill, right? So I have content But when we're thinking about doing, like we had up here, or applying, it helps if we think about experiential learning as being skill-based instead of content-based, right? This is, I think, the big thing we have to get students to see. They come into our class and think it's about content, learning a thing, but really we're teaching them how to do something with that thing, right? Or how to apply that thing. And so I think experiential learning can be a great way to help them get to that a little quicker, rather than us just telling them why our content is so important. Definitely. Okay, so those are great. So we can get some commonalities there. The application part, the doing, it involves some kind of action. Obviously connections between what we're doing in the classroom and that. But then also this idea of the real world, right? Connecting to that in some way. Because obviously that's what we're preparing them for, right? And that kind of gets to, and in a minute we'll come, I have the website up here, but we're going to actually come back to this and look at the definition of what experiential learning is on the QEP website. And I think we're going to see some connections. So you'll be able to get what you have here and see how it compares to what the QEP committee came up with. But then the next question I asked you was why we think it's important, right? So before we look at this graph, I wanted to get some of your answers about why experiential learning was important. So anybody want to give me a reason why they think we should be doing it? Other than like what we may have obviously already mentioned? Yeah.
I'm Miss 11. I'm in anthropology,
Okay,
and
yes.
I said it is active, engaged work. Students experience concepts in action.
Oh, okay. So doing, action, application, we're getting the sense that, we're doing something with it rather than just taking it in and regurgitating it. I think that's the biggest disconnect between high school and college for me. Freaking standardized test, right? This idea that that's what I'm here for, is to learn everything you have to tell me so I can spit it back out on a test. No, that's not what college is. I feel like I spent a lot of time with my freshmen trying to convince them that that is not what it is. And yes, experiential learning is important for that, getting that, right? Helping them understand that, maybe a little bit easier than us just telling them over and over again. Anybody else have something they wanted to add? Yeah, in the back.
Also, impression that our students should be global citizens.
Yes.
Experiential learning is the way to make them like global citizens.
Yes. So when I revised gen ed at that previous university, that was one of our kind of things that kept us on track. How can we create a gen ed program that, yes, creates global citizens, people who are more than just getting a degree in a major, right, and going into the workforce, right? Okay. So these are all like really good abstract reasons, and that's what college is for. But there's also research, right? So we know this. It wouldn't be a QEP initiative if there wasn't. And I just found this that basically has a triangle for retention rates. Obviously looking at methods and where retention happens the most, and obviously all the things that we mentioned in our definition that go with experiential learning, by practicing, by doing, and using it and applying it. Obviously, that's where our retention rates soar. So if we really want them to understand and get what we're teaching them, then experiential learning can be a tool that we use, if we're not already, to get to that next step for the student. So it definitely has lots of benefits, right? And then the last question, right, was why you were here, right? So obviously, hopefully you're here to learn about all of these things and how it might fit into what you're already doing, or how it might already be in what you're doing, and you just kind of follow a couple of steps to get it documented. But my goal for us today is to do what we just did, right? Think about what experiential learning is. Like I said, we'll take a look at the QEP definition in a little bit to understand the importance of it, which a lot of you already kind of seem to grasp, which is good. And then my goal is to connect it to this one particular part, right? So there's lots of ways students can experience, ways to connect their learning. I'm focusing on the undergraduate creative inquiry part of it. If you've played around with the application for the endorsement, you have to pick one of these areas that you feel like your activity that you're going to get endorsed is kind of aligned with. And so obviously this is the one I'm focusing on today because this is the one that I have worked with. And then obviously my goal at the end is to help you see how what the QEP has laid out for us in terms of its goals and that endorsement application, how you could apply it yourself. So that's kind of where we're headed. Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting to do that. I shouldn't have done that fancy stuff, right? Oh, you get all, get all excited. All right, so let's take a little closer look at that QEP initiative and the connection. So this is the definition, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go up here and click on the link to the QEP website. So if you go to qep.valdosta.edu, so easy. This is where you'll end up. This is the home page. You can scroll down, you get some basic information about what we're doing, but I'm actually going to go to the Experiential Learning link at the top and then just go straight to what we want to know, which is, what's that definition that the QEP committee came up with for experiential learning? And basically, it's right here in the middle. Student application of theory, skills, techniques, and/or practices in a context that focuses on applications outside the traditional classroom, but may also stem from a course assignment or project. So kind of in a nutshell, a little bit of what everybody kind of shared with us today. That's the definition that the QEP goals are connected to. So there are 3 goals that the QEP is all about. And if you fill out, so what I did was I'm going to show you in a little bit my actual application, because I applied for this to be implemented in the spring. So I'm working on implementing my EL activity this semester, but I had to fill out the application in the fall. And one of the things you'll have to do is identify the learning category, which is kind of, whether you're going to do undergraduate research or creative inquiry like I'm doing. There's a global citizenship category that you could work in. I could see the languages being able to do that pretty easily. And then there's a servant leadership and community engagement category that you could choose. Obviously, there's different ways that your course might fit into it, but if you're here, you're probably interested in the undergraduate research part of it and the creative inquiry, and that's what I'll spend some time with. But my goal is also to give you kind of an overview of what QEP is looking for and how that endorsement process works, so that you can see that you could pick any of those categories probably and figure out a way that your course can align with it in terms of one activity. So one of the things we want to clarify right off the bat is that you're not getting your entire course turned into an experiential learning course. You're choosing something that you're doing within that course that can be aligned with these QEP goals and student learning outcomes, so that activity actually fits the definition of experiential learning. So when I show you what I'm doing in my course, I chose to do this with my freshman Comp 2 course, which is the research-based composition course that every freshman takes. And I did not turn that entire course into an experiential learning experience. I just took an activity that we were already doing as part of the research process, and I added an experiential learning element to it. And so we'll get a chance to see what that looks like. So one of the things you'll have to figure out is which category you want to fit into. And then one of the things you want to think about while you're working on the endorsement is how to align it with the goals of the QEP. So that's what I have next in the presentation, is what those goals are, right? So there's 3 goals that you can think about in terms of what you're already doing in your classroom and how you might choose one of these goals that you feel like an activity within your class could meet, right? And maybe it's a course learning outcome already for your course, and you could just align it with one of these QEP goals, and you might already be doing that in your course, so therefore just finding that activity can be as simple as it is. Or you could create an activity like I did that I think aligns with it. But these are the 3 goals for the QEP, right? Number one is to provide students with intentional opportunities to apply problem-based learning to disciplinary and interdisciplinary application of scholarship outside a traditional academic setting. So that's goal number 1. So you might be thinking about which goal might fit with what you're already doing in your classes. Goal number 2, provide students with intentional opportunities to participate, interact, and explore individual and cultural differences. You might see how that might align with the global citizenship thing we were mentioning earlier. And then number 3, provide students with intentional opportunities to reflect on their participation and articulate their personal growth and development. So a lot of the reflection stuff that we were mentioning over here, you can kind of see is in QEP goal number 3. Obviously, you could have an activity that does all 3 of these, right? But for our kind of purposes today, does one seem to fit the undergraduate research creative inquiry category more? Once you look at it, which one do you think? Goal 1, 2, or 3? This was goal 3. And then this was goal 2. And then this was goal 1. Any of those seem to be the one that probably aligns? Yeah, does that sound? Yeah, and that's what I ended up doing. So because I am teaching a research-based course to college freshmen, it just seemed that goal number 1 would be the easiest way to align my activity with this goal, right? Make sure that within my activity, I'm providing them with intentional opportunities to try to solve a problem or approach a problem with not just with the scholarship inside the classroom, but scholarship outside. So traditionally, we would do research inside the classroom. We would learn about the research process. Obviously, they can't go out and do their own research as freshmen, right? But I was thinking about what could be a way that they could go outside the classroom and collect information. And so we'll talk about that when I get to what I decided to do. But yeah, you could start here with QEP goal number 1. Obviously, goal number 2 and 3 could also be something that you're doing in your classroom where you could use that as your starting point for this is the objective I'm trying to reach with this activity. That's how I know that this activity is going to fit what the QEP is looking for when I do my application, right? So that's kind of what these goals kind of help us figure out. So yes, so I'm kind of working with goal number 1 when I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. But let's talk about what you're going to do first, right? So if we're talking about undergraduate research and creative inquiry, and you chose this workshop to come to because of that, I thought it might be a good time to think about where does that fit in and what does that look like in your course, right? So I kind of already told you, I teach a freshman research comp class. So for me, they create a research paper and project, and we spend the whole semester doing that, right? What about you guys? What kinds of ways is research and creative inquiry connected to your classroom or your discipline in a way that you could maybe start to think about experiential learning in a way? So anybody wanted to share? Or are we just here because of the experiential learning, not the undergraduate research? I don't know. That's fine too. Yeah?
So maybe this is cheating because I've already gotten an EL endorsement for this.
Yay!
But,
Good.
I'm doing an activity where I'm doing beer brewing with my experimental archaeology students. And so we're taking a look at, they're all going to have a chance to see the effect that that fermentation has on different types of grains and take a look at what that does to the starches and then use that data to interpret the archaeological record. And so I'm going to have students each present data and then use each other's data to put together.
Wow. How long is that going to take?
A few weeks.
Yeah, sounds like it. So yes, so an activity like that, very intentionally doing everything that we would want experiential learning to do, taking a very abstract concept like anthropology and connecting it to something very real world and relevant, which I love, right? Students, who doesn't want to learn about the fermentation process in college, right? I think that could be, But the fact that you're taking several weeks as part of your course, that is something you could do. Just think about a project you're already doing, and could you add an element to it, or are you already doing something like that where they're taking in some kind of real world experience and using that real world experience to understand a concept in the classroom. So yeah, that definitely would get approved for an EL endorsement. Obviously, yes, since it already has been. Yes, love it. That is not as cool as what I'm going to be doing, so don't get your hopes up when we get to my application. But I love it. Anybody else have how else do you see undergraduate research or creative inquiry in your course?
So I kind of have a question.
Yes. So what department are you in? Just so that. Oh, okay. So business. All right.
And I'm interested in. So is this going to result in like an original publishable research project for the students?
It might. So there's been very similar research done. So actually, I kind of got the idea from in the lab where I did my postdoc. They did a really similar project, and they actually did end up publishing with the students. I don't know if the data are going to be unique enough for the students to publish, but if they are, if we're using like new plants, they might.
Yeah.
So it's possible.
That's kind of the issue I run into. I teach an experimental economics course, and so every week we do a new economics experiment where we do hands-on, with different economic models, and it's a research-like process. So the students design these experiments, they run them, they analyze the data, but they're experiments that have been done many times before. So they're learning about research, they're learning about these models, but it's not generating
new
graduate research that can be published. And I guess one of the things I was hoping to get out of this might be just some ideas about how to take it that next step for undergrads who don't have a lot of background. How do we feed this into something that maybe could be published?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Well, in honors, we have some undergraduate research journals that are national journals, peer reviewed. I know there are different expectations in October, but these are pretty high profile journals that I think, including Amino on campus. So there are those opportunities in interdisciplinary journals, and it would be nice to see some of our discipline specific professional organizations develop undergraduate research opportunities like that. They tend to focus heavily on faculty development and less on the undergraduate, but they are out there. And I think the Undergraduate Research Council is also interested in aligning with some of those principles.
And that is what I've been doing in my class, is introducing them to the Undergraduate Research Council on campus and starting with their ideas, trying to get them in this mode of thinking that there are next steps they can take with their research rather than just what we're doing in the classroom. So this idea that research can be more than just, a process that we're completing in the classroom to teach them something. It can actually lead to things. So one of the things that I do to incorporate that element of undergraduate research in that way is I have them participate in a lot of what the Undergraduate Research Council is doing in terms of like witnessing it. I mean, they're freshmen, so they're not joining it yet. But if they go and they see what students are doing on campus with undergraduate research, it kind of gets them fired up about, wanting to go a step further. Like they're actually having sessions in the Academic Support Center about faculty and student, relationships. And I feel like that's a big part of getting the students to realize that, professors often are here to do that kind of thing, and that's what they want their students to help them with. So that would be a question that you could kind of help answer yourself by doing an endorsement activity like this, right? Find a way and use this to kind of be it. And then if you wanted to do something outside of campus, right, you could apply for the seed grant in the spring and you'll get money towards helping you do that, which is even better. What I'm doing so that I don't need the money because I'm working it into how we're doing the class. But yes, activities that are more extensive or more geared towards getting the students to actually go to a conference and present research. That could be something you could use your seed grant money to kind of help you facilitate so that you get to that point. So if you're here for undergraduate research and creative inquiry, this is going to be super helpful in terms of I'm going to give you an example of how I do it in my class. But do you have to be doing it with undergraduate, research and creative inquiry? No, you could use any of those QEP goals that we looked at to fill out your application. Again, I don't know why I did that. All right, so basically you can maybe think about how your example that we were just kind of talking about does what that experiential learning definition says. So when we're thinking about activities we have in our classroom already or projects that we're already doing, making sure that we see a really easy alignment with that application idea or the doing idea or the connection to the real world. If you're already seeing that, then you can compare it to any of the goals, but obviously the goal that I was focusing on was problem solving. What can I do in my classroom that allows them to really understand the importance of using research to solve problems? And that was kind of where I came at it because that's what the QEP goal that I was focusing on kind of led me to. So you could think about, right, is there a course goal related to undergraduate research or creative inquiry that the experiential learning component could help you achieve? Or maybe you're already doing something. Is there a way you could maximize that alignment with the QEP and student engagement using some of those resources on the QEP website, right? So I've got it here again. And if we're here, this experiential learning link this is where I found the definition. But if you click on the exploring experiential learning, it literally walks you through step by step some of the options, hopefully. I don't know. Okay, maybe Let's give it a little, there we go, a little nudge. So here we have some examples of what experiential learning activities could look like. A lot of these are big examples, things that you may not be involved in, like study abroad or semester exchanges, career shadowing, but some of you might, right? In terms of what I'm thinking, it's more creative activities, maybe activities that design ways to help the students work on their leadership skills, and then obviously here, undergraduate research and professional scholarship, like we were just talking about. But like I said, you're basically just showing that you have aligned some of the activities within your course to what we're seeing in those QEP goals. And what that means, if I'm going to scroll way down, is basically showing how your course incorporates all 4 parts of this researchable Kolb's experiential learning cycle. So this is where the QEP has designed, based on Kolb's model, that the endorsement app kind of follows. And basically, in order to apply for the endorsement, you just have to show how you're doing all 4 of these stages with your activity. So you just, once you choose the activity that you think aligns with one of those goals, then you come here and you just look at how you're going to incorporate all of these steps, because it's more than just the first one, right? So coming up with the activity, that's that first one, the concrete experience. So what is the activity that aligns with one of those QEP goals? And then after that, you got to think, how am I going to build in the reflection that we were mentioning over here that seems to be pretty important? And that would be the second stage, where at some point, either during or right after the experience, they're doing some kind of reflection, right? They're trying to understand what they're learning while they're learning it, right? And kind of some of that metacognitive stuff that we know really helps them connect with the experience more meaningfully. And then the abstract conceptualization, right? This is where they make connections, not just to the experience and maybe the reason for the experience, but also like what we were learning at the beginning of class, or what's going on in the world, right? And it's like starting to kind of understand that experience is more than just a classroom experience. It's like a learning opportunity to learn something bigger, right? To connect to something bigger. And that might be a theory that you're working on. It might be, some kind of concept. It might be leadership skills. It might be something in the real world that you want them to understand. And then active experimentation, that's just where they actually kind of synthesize everything as it's come full circle, right? They get to a point where they can maybe create something based on everything they've learned, or whether they can, get to the point where they could publish something or present something, right? That shows where they've gotten to in that context. So this is what, on the application, you would show that your activity is kind of hitting all of these stages, that what you're doing within that activity that would fit each of these stages. And that's basically the majority of the application. You would literally just be describing the activity here. This is my application. Then describing your reflective observation, describing your abstract conceptualization, describing your active experimentation. That's the app in a nutshell right there. So nothing that I don't think we could all handle. And it's not, as long as you've thought it through, you're going to be in good shape probably in terms of where you end up. So let's take a look at what I have done, right? So that's going to be the how. So like I mentioned, English 1102 is what all freshmen take usually the second semester of their freshman year. I'm teaching 4 sections of it right now. And so basically, English 1101 that they take their first semester is meant to kind of teach them some of those basic academic writing concepts, the use of rhetoric, how to form an argument, things like that. When we get, and they use sources just a little bit. When we get to 1102, it's about a full-blown research-based something where they're incorporating sources in order to make claims. And so what I've done, everybody in English 1101 and 1102 can do whatever they want. So we can do whatever we want. So what I do in my 1102 course, because I'm always full of non-English majors, right, is I create a research-based process that aligns with an academic research article. So they basically create an academic research article, but it's based on a lit review instead of being based on their own research. And we talk about why it can't be based on their own research, but they have to use academic research articles for their sources. So they have to go, and all the information they base their lit review on is based on prior research on the topic that they've chosen. It works out really well because no matter what kind of student I have, they get interested because they pick things in their major that they want to learn about, or they pick things in their life that they want to learn about, or they pick things that, just are curious to them. And once they learn how fun research is, the course teaches itself. It's so I've just had a lot of good experiences with that. So when I decided to do this EL ambassador thing, we were tasked with this, maybe you should do an endorsement for your class if you're all excited about it. And I had to kind of come up with a way that I would. And what I decided to do is come up with a way that one of their sources would not be a research-based article. It would be an expert that they have to go find and interview. And I figured VSU's campus, right? They don't even have to leave campus if they want to find an expert, because we have so many professors who are experts in their field. But if they wanted to find an expert outside of VSU, obviously I am going to encourage that as well. And basically what they will do for their activity is interview that expert. But in order to really fit the QEP model for a concrete experience, thinking about what I want them to do, I'm going to actually have them create their own interview questions and get together in groups and talk it out. So instead of me just giving them, I want them to actually take the initiative and figure out what they would need based on the research articles that they've already read. So they've already read 3 research articles at this point. They know what good research is based on. They know the kinds of questions that are being asked. They know the kinds of problems that are out there. Now go figure out what you need to know from your expert. And so it's basically going to become their 4th, because I make all my classes usually, they have to have 4 research-based articles. The class I'm doing this with, and I'm not doing it with all my classes because this is my pilot year, but one of the classes, instead of the 4th article, they're going to find an expert. And it's been great because I've already told them that they're going to do this. I had to give them that heads up, and they had to do a pre-test, about their experiential learning experience so far before the course. And already some of them are choosing topics because their parent is an expert, right? So like, I'm doing this because my dad's a cop and he's always complaining about this. And so now I'm going to go find out more. And they're like, and I'm already going to have my expert right there. Or I'm doing this because my aunt is a nurse right now during COVID and it's driving her nuts, and people da. And so that's what I'm finding. So I'm like, oh, I wish I had done this with all my classes now, because I didn't realize they were going to be so gung-ho about this whole expert thing. So that's what I'm doing, having them create it. So then one of the other things you're going to see on the QEP website is in order to make sure that what you're doing with the activity really fits experiential learning, there are also 3 student learning outcomes that you can think of trying to align with each of these steps. And so what we're going to see is after I explain the process, which I just did for you here, I'm going to show you the student learning outcome that I found on the QEP website that I feel like I'm doing with this particular activity that's part of my experiential learning. So if you go to the QEP website and you just scroll down a little bit further than we were on the one we were just looking at, you'll see these SLOs right underneath the goals. And it's SLO number 2 says students will be able to describe either verbally or in writing or through performance how they took initiative, made decisions, and were held accountable as a direct result of experiences outside. And I feel like this goal is what led me to make them come up with their own interview questions. Originally, I was thinking I would just create a standard set. And when I saw this goal, I'm like, no. Let them do it, right? They're going to be interviewing different people in different fields. They should have different interview questions. And so I'm going to let them do that. And so that's going to be part of that. Yeah?
Creative inquiry.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And yes, because they're going to have to do research on what a good interview question is, right? And how that works. No yes or no questions, right? Because that's not going to get you anywhere. So yeah, it'll be lots of discussions we'll get to have. And I'm going to put them in groups and let them talk things out. Once they've come up with their set, they can compare with other people's and maybe take or share, right, what they found. So obviously, one thing that might be helpful for you is to think about what would this look like if you were going to do your course activity, right? So So what I did was I just went to my application and I looked for some things that I used in my application to kind of describe this part. And so I said things like, I plan to, right? So one of the things you have to do in this part of the application is just describe your activity. So obviously that's an easy one, right? Something you would plan to do. The objective of the assignment involves, I had a sentence where I aligned that objective with that QEP goal of, what we're doing in terms of problem-based research. Students will be responsible for. That was something I put in there when I was talking about them coming up with the interview questions and taking initiative, which aligns with that SLO number 2, right? So these are just some sample prompts that you could use, right, to make this section pretty easy for you. Like I showed you, mine's just, a paragraph, a really good paragraph doing this. Just to give the committee a sense of why this experience is going to be experiential learning, right? What's going to make it different? And then you do the reflective observation section. And so this is where you're incorporating some reflection either during or right after the activity. So what I'm going to do is after they've done the interview, they're going to get back with those groups that they were in that helped them with their interview questions, and they're going to compare their interview experiences, right? So which part of the interview process was most effective, right? And then where was there a lull or something that was awkward or something like that? What could maybe have been done differently, right? And then obviously what they learned about the characteristics of a successful interview, because that's a life skill, right? So conducting an interview would help them also learn what a good interview looks like and what a good interviewee should be. So if they really get engaged with the person they're interviewing, they can maybe thinking about what that person did that kept them engaged, and maybe that's what I should do when I go on interviews when I really want something, just that idea. So I thought maybe incorporating that alongside the actual content they're collecting, right, the research would be nice. You're also going to notice that in each of my little bubbles, I also kind of kept this for me. So I created this presentation last semester before I filled out my endorsement application. And I wanted to kind of give myself a sense of where were they going to work this into their research paper. So that interview process was going to be part of their methods section. So they're going to report back in the methods section of their research paper the process they went through and how they chose which questions and why they chose this one and not this one. And that'll be part of their methods. And then in the results section, right, they're going to include the reflections on what they learned. So not about the research process, because that's going to be more about the life skill, but what they learned from their expert. So that would be actually one of the sources that they're talking about in their lit review, which is what the results section will be. And then that aligned with SLO number 1. So SLO number 1 on the QEP website says students will be able to reflect, either verbally in writing or through performance, how they develop knowledge, skills, and values as a direct result of the experiences outside of the traditional academic setting. So obviously, they're learning interview skills, but they're also gaining knowledge and they're learning about the values, from that expert in terms of that particular problem that they're researching. So I thought that one would align. When I went back and looked at my endorsement application, these were a couple of prompts that I saw. Obviously, saying things like during the activity and after the activity really indicates that the reflection is happening then, right? So if they're doing something during the activity, like mine, or recording their experiences with the interview, and then obviously after the activity, they're reflecting and they're getting those groups and they're making connections. And then these reflections will become part of what they put into their final paper, right, in the results section. So that's kind of a couple of the prompts that I used that kind of made that clear. And then the third one, abstract conceptualization. So remember, this is where they're reflecting on the previous experience, but they're also developing observations about those experiences. So in mine, this is where I'm having them kind of synthesize what they learned in the session with the other sources that they found. So now they have this expert interview session where they've learned a lot from someone who's actually experienced it. Now, how does that compare with all the research that you've read in those first 3 articles where they're doing studies on it? Do you see correlations? Do you see a misalignment in some areas? Do you see a difference, a perspective or opinion, right? So that would be kind of like the abstract conceptualization part for me. Obviously, that's going to be reported out in the lit review as well. where they're looking for those misalignments or those correlations, kind of like you would do in research. And that one goes right along with this SLO number 1 as well. If you remember that one, where they're developing knowledge, skills, and values as a result of their interview experience. In this part of my application, I had words like students will synthesize what they've learned, and connections to the course learning outcomes will be made through this, right? My research-based class, right, has course learning outcomes where they are supposed to be synthesizing the material that they're learning. So obviously, this is one of the ways I'm aligning there. Each student will reflect on how the activity has informed what they think about their topic or has changed their mind about some of the research that they've seen on their topic, that kind of thing. So those were just a couple of the prompts that I used for the third section. And then the last section, the active experimentation. So in this section, individuals begin the process of testing existing ideas by creating new experiences. So this is basically where the application, the doing part, they're doing things at the early part of it, but now the doing actually becomes something that they can own a little bit more than, what I've asked them to do. So what I'm going to have them do in my class is basically create a discussion section, right, which they were going to do anyway. But in that discussion section, they now have to take everything they learned from their sources and from this interview, and they have to come up with some contribution that they can make to this topic, right? What kind of insight are you bringing now to this topic that you're not really seeing very clearly in the research already? So is there something that's being overlooked? Is there something that people aren't really connecting to things? Or is there something that has been done so much that people haven't been able to solve the problem, so maybe it's because we're looking at the problem differently. Or maybe there's a whole bunch of solutions to the problem, and after talking to your expert, you realize none of them are good. It's because the solution doesn't even have the right foundation, something like that. I always have my research students come up with some kind of insight in the discussion, and obviously they would, in this particular class, we'll use this interview assignment to kind of add to that. I have them do this anyway, but I thought this would be a nice addition. There's also a final reflection that they complete. It's their last writing assignment for the class. They do it, as their final exam. And so obviously I would include in that final reflection the interview experience and how it, changed the way they saw research, right? And so that aligns with our last SLO, number 3. Students will be able to reflect verbally and writing through performance how they grew and developed intellectually, creatively, emotionally, socially, or physically as a direct result of the experiences. So obviously that final reflection surely gives me an indication of that. But really the discussion, can they take what they've learned and give insight? That is like the hardest thing to get from them instead of regurgitation. So if I can get something in that discussion that is an original thought based on what they've synthesized, I'm going to feel like I've accomplished this. But obviously the final reflection makes sure that they've learned something, because something's going to come out of there that's going to make me feel like it was all worth it, right? And then some prompts that I used in this section, pretty obvious ones, right? Students will apply what they've learned from their experience by doing what? Each student will complete a final reflection. You could use that, right? And then students will use their newfound knowledge to create. So these are all things that I kind of mentioned in that part of my application in order to, make it very clear how I'm doing that part of the cycle, right? And then I think that's pretty much it, right? That was a little overview of what I have to offer when it comes to this.